compared to most other games, War Thunder's gameplay can be very complex. It has a lot of variables need to be taken into account when balancing it, and as such, it is generally more unbalanced. As far as mechanics contributing towards that, stabilizers are one of the biggest. Stabilizers can make or break a vehicle. A vehicle having stabilizer or not can be the difference between a vehicle as overpowered or a vehicle as useless. That's probably a bit of an exaggeration, but the point is that stabilizers are incredibly powerful. Unless you're brand new to War Thunder, you probably already know what a gun stabilizer is, but for the uninformed, a gun stabilizer is exactly what it sounds like. It keeps the gun steady when the tank is moving, so oscillations in the suspension or bumps in the terrain won't throw it off target. Obviously, this is a pretty big advantage for a tank to have. War Thunder has two main kinds of stabilizer, so-called short-stop stabilizers, more accurately known as vertical stabilizers, and dual-axis stabilizers. Vertical stabilizers only account for vertical disturbances, and only work at relatively low speeds. The most common short-stop stabilizer, the one found on the M4 Sherman, has a maximum speed of 24 km per hour. Dual-axis stabilizers take both horizontal and vertical oscillations into account, but their main benefit is the fact they have much higher speed limits. Usually you won't be able to go fast enough to throw dual-axis stabilizers off. Horizontal stability doesn't matter much, since you're controlling both the gun and tank itself. In reality, the driver might make wild turns to dodge things, but in War Thunder you don't have to worry about that. Both types provide a substantial advantage, but dual-axis stabilizers have the biggest impact. For example, the British Centurions used to be 6.7. After they got dual-axis stabilizers, their battle rating shot all the way up to 7.3. They're also why the 8.0 BR bracket's such a mess. That's where they start to become prolific on main battle tanks. So you have a bunch of unstabilized post-war tanks fighting stabilized MBTs. Something else worth noting is that some nations never really emphasize stabilizers, creating a bit of an imbalance. A perfect example would be France. France used a lot of oscillating turrets in their designs, and oscillating turrets are very difficult to stabilize. So they only start getting stabilized tanks in 9.0 BR range, with stuff like the AMX-30 Super. Stabilizers could be more balanced in War Thunder, and it largely comes down to how Gaijin models them. I mentioned earlier that stabilizers on Shermans had a 24 km/h cutoff, meaning that they work perfectly fine up until you hit that limit. Then the gun becomes practically unstabilized. Once you pass that limit, the gun moves just as much as it would on a normal tank. It should probably go without saying, but that's not how stabilizers actually function. There isn't some magic number where they cease working entirely. On early stabilizers, the higher the speed went, the less effective they were. That's because oscillations increased as speed increased. For the Sherman, the highest recorded speed the stabilizer worked at is 24 km/h. And by worked I mean it was still kind of effective. So that's the hard cutoff in War Thunder. And on most main battle tanks in War Thunder, you'll never hit that hard cutoff with the dual-axis stabilizer. Only some incredibly fast vehicles can do that, and only on hard road. This also isn't very accurate. The Centurion stabilizer wasn't exponentially better, especially not to the point that it could fire accurately on the move. In fact, it was only a little bit better than the M4s. Even with things like the M60 AOS and T72, you could only fire on the move at around 25 km/h. You didn't get true high-speed fire on the move capability until the late 70s to early 80s, and only on some more advanced vehicles. So instead of the stabilizer being either on or off, I think they should have a range of effectiveness, mostly based on the year the vehicle is made. Stabilizer information can be hard to come by, so there's not much choice. Going back to the Sherman as an example, the stabilizer would be very effective at 1 to 15 km/h, acceptable at 15 to 24, and only somewhat stabilized at 24 to 32, and beyond that it's basically unstabilized. Those figures are just for the sake of demonstration. I'm sure that to find the right balance a lot of testing would need to be done. Ideally, in the acceptable to somewhat stabilized range you could still hit some shots in the move, but only if you were skilled. This would apply to tier 7 vehicles and some tier 6s, with the ranges changing based on the era. I think this would level the playing field a bit more, but I can see how some would be apprehensive about such a system, so I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. If the feedback is mostly positive, I'll send it on over to Gaijin. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.